I'm honored here to be receiving the John McCarthy Award, and John basically suggested to me the idea that brought about the news service. I came first of all to the AI lab in 1971 as a PhD student, and I had been basically unemployed at that point, and I sent a letter, I think, as soon as I was accepted, and I guess when I was accepted, maybe I was assigned to the AI lab. I don't remember how that was done in those days. But as soon as I learned that, I contacted the AI lab, which was basically less earnest, and I said, you know, can I start earlier than September, end of September, whenever it was? And he wrote back or gave me his number. I called him, and he said, yeah, you can start as soon as you want. And I said, can I start next week? He said yes. So I spent 5 days driving up here with my stuff, driving back, bringing up more stuff, driving back, leaving my rental, coming back up here, and I started basically a week after I had talked to Les, gotten the okay from Les to start. And so I started in May and got a good head start at the AI lab. And then, of course, the incoming students that I was part of came in that September, one of whom was Hans Moravec. And he and I were good friends at the AI lab. And I enjoyed spending time there with him and his cart and all that stuff. As a PhD student, I was working 80 or 90 hours a week. It was, I really enjoyed the AI lab. I mean, I hated weekends because everybody else, not everybody, but a lot of people left. And I didn't. I mean, I came back to work on weekends. I spent, I don't know, 10 or 12 hours a day.
Got better time sharing.
Indeed, it's better use of the computer on the weekend or late at night. And I tended to not come in real early, so I had good late night time. But I worked 80 or 90 hours a week. And then in the spring of '72, at the Computer Science Department Spring Picnic, which happened every year in those days, I was talking to John, and he suggested this idea of Newswire, going into the computer and being able to read the news online. Online, I guess the term hardly even existed at that point, but he made that suggestion, and I said, that sounds like an interesting project. So that spring and summer, I spent some time on that, and I don't remember when the project actually became public to the AI lab folks, but that was my primitive news service program called APE. And APE basically was only able to index, it only indexed words that we stuck into it. So we knew, okay, Nixon, everybody's going to want to read about Nixon because he was in the news. So we took an almanac and stuck in a lot of words that we thought would be important. But it just wasn't enough. Even though, APE could index these stories from the AP Newswire, which is what we had, it really wasn't enough. So a couple of years later, after I basically dropped out of being a student and became a systems programmer, I rewrote the whole system, and then it became the news service, NS. And now it was indexing every word, basically in every story, pretty much like Google does now. So it was a nice little search engine there for the AP Wire. I eliminated, I think I found some book that said the most common 15 words in English, and I took those out. I didn't index those, the, a, and. So it saved a little bit of space. I compressed the words down to 5 bits, so I couldn't do numbers. I could do 5 bits because that got me 26 letters. And then we had the AP Newswire. We added the New York Times, and we stored 2 weeks' worth of news. And I think the news service program, NS, became basically about the most widely used program at the AI lab, except for the editor. And people went to it in times of interesting things during, worldwide happenings. They wanted to find out what's happening, and they would use NS to read the news because they didn't have to leave the AI lab. I mean, they didn't, and it was faster than waiting for tomorrow's newspaper. It was the AP and the New York Times wires coming in live, and you could read them actually literally live on the screen as they came into the computer by running the program called HOT. So you could see either the AP wire or the New York Times wire. Of course, most of you know this because you were there, at least those of you who were there in '74 or later. And I think at one point I wrote a little program called Hotline, which basically there was one line up at the top of the screen just below the Who line. Probably most of you remember the Who line. And And there was a line there that was used for almost nothing in the system except when you did hold to print, just to stop output being printed out, and it said holding or something like that. I created this program called Hotline, which spewed the live AP wire, or the New York Times wire, I guess, on that line. So you could be using the rest of the screen normally, and the AP wire be going across, just to distract you or whatever. Kind of pointless, but it was a fun little hack. While many of you were out there earning Turing Awards and the like, I got interested in juggling. And I juggled with a few of you, Dave Wilkins, are you here? And a couple other people at the AI Lab. But I got really interested in it and involved in it. And eventually I competed in the International Jugglers Association teams championships a few times, and basically formed this group we call the Stanford Juggling Research Institute. We actually do research in juggling. I mean, it's, we don't have we're not incorporated or anything like that, but we do actually do research. Every week we meet at Stanford and create new juggling patterns. I'm going to demonstrate one here on YouTube. And I have a whole bunch of these on YouTube, but I'm just going to pick one here.
Make sure you tell us about the notation.
Yes. In the process of inventing a lot of juggling patterns, I decided I needed a notation to record them. So I invented a notation called causal diagrams. There had been horrible notations used before denoting the position of every object, and it was just way too complex to figure out if someone gave you an image of some, a recorded image of some pattern. Now let me see if I can figure out how to do this. See, oh, looks good. Oh, didn't even have to click. That was good. Okay, how do I scroll? There we go. It's not very dark here. Oh, we don't have Flash. Well, maybe this is not going to work then. Not too bad. Well, you can go here and see all of these patterns that I have. If you go to youtube.com/ELGRA2, look up at the top, ELGRA2. I live in El Granada, so you'll see a bunch of stuff there. I was going to give you a demonstration, but I guess Flash is not loaded on this. What's that? Well, it's saying get the latest Flash, and that suggests that it doesn't have Flash. But anyway, you can look at those on YouTube. Just a couple of other things I want to mention. In 1980, in the late 1980s, I spent about a couple of years and a few tape drives trying to convert the DART backup tapes of the AI Lab files. About 3,000 tapes we ended up finally copying. And you heard earlier that MIT failed to preserve their archives. Well, they apparently got kicked out of their space, and they sent us their tape drive. And that's the actual tape drive we used for our 3,000 tapes, because I had burned out the previous couple of tape drives, which were very old anyway to start with. So we had those tapes, and then we converted them to 9-track drives, 9-track tapes, and then a few years later, with the help of Bruce Baumgart, we converted that to disk, and now it's all online. Some of it personal stuff, password protected, and other stuff public. One other thing I did was I worked with Brian Harvey and ported the weights display system into EarCom display system under TOPS 10 in Paris. And that was a fun 3-week adventure, because the first 3 days I was there, the air conditioning had broken down and I couldn't do anything on the computer, so I was a tourist for 3 days and worked like mad the remaining days, and finished at like 4 a.m. or something the last day before my flight was supposed to leave. And so the EarCom computer music group there in Paris, which you heard earlier, could run E. This was the whole point. Andy Moore wanted to be able to run E, and so he could. All right, I think that's enough, and we'll let.
John wants to say something.
Here, I can hold it while you do the next person. I'll hold it.
The new service program has interesting politics associated with it. When we put it up, it was, I was a little bit worried about it because it wasn't AI. Well, we did a lot of things that weren't AI, but this one ended up as the prominent thing that we did wasn't AI. First of all, DARPA, the DARPA people liked it because they liked to demonstrate it. That was one thing that these majors and captains in DARPA could demonstrate all by themselves. The embarrassing thing is that we had no security in those days, and we didn't need it. Anybody could run our programs, except that none of our programs were popular, except that when news service became available, it was popular. And our computer could get loaded with random people running the news service. So the first security that we actually required was to prevent the news service being run by random people.
Okay. Oh, what?